Uh, Nirish is Kenyan, born and bred in Mombasa, and so a bit about Chigwell. Chigwell is a small boutique housing development company, but specialize in gated communities. You will know them for Phenomenon Estate, where they've done about 430, maybe 440 mansionettes. They're also known to have completed their village in Athi River, where they have about 127 mansionettes. So quite something. Aside from that, they are also shareholders in Tilisi Development, which is a small town of sorts, about 400 acres with the light industry, commercial, residential, plus a wide range of other multi-user bits and pieces. Finally, I'll introduce David Gaido, who sits in today as the president of African Association of Quantity Surveyors. Now, David is a Kenyan-based quantity surveyor and a project manager as well. He graduated from the University of Nairobi and proceeded to do his master's in construction project management in the University of Liverpool. So he has 28 years of experience in the industry, and I'm happy we'll be able to leverage on the years of experience as we go by into this discussion. So he's also a council member of African Association of Quantity Surveyors, and I mentioned that since 2018. In 2014, he became, or rather was elected vice president for Eastern region in 2014. And from 2017, he's been the president, a position that he will continue to hold until 2020. Aside from that, he's also a fellow at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and Institute of Construction Project Managers in Kenya. So, right, so that's our panel for today. So I'm going to just jump right into it, and I'm hoping that I'll get a bit of support. If you have any questions, we can table them for the end of our discussion. So
while Kevin starts, one little announcement for our audience. On all of your Zoom screens, there is a special button called Q&A. So if you have any questions for any of our panel members through the entire discussion, please keep posting your questions there. Thank you.
Right. So there is no denying that the pandemic has had a negative impact on construction activity. Therefore, I think it would be great if we start by identifying some of these disruptions first and how construction is adapting to supply chain disruptions. Then from there, we'll slowly begin to unpackage and discuss ways to mitigate construction supply chain. So I'll begin with David Gaido, who's a design consultant, quantity surveyor. So in traditional procurement, design consultants are first-tier suppliers working for developers. Therefore, I'm keen to understand, maybe from your point of view, some of the interferences in technology, data, and human resources that consultants have experienced in meeting the needs of project developers and such as a result of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, GBB, for the initiative, and TNT for moderating this session. I also want to appreciate my fellow panelists and go straight to your question. I'm going to put it in form of project development stages, and I'll mostly share my experience at where I work and the discussions we have had with colleagues over the last 3 months. So the first cycle is the initial stage, and the disruptions which have been experienced in this stage is shelving of projects. For example, if someone was doing a school, it's no longer a very high priority. So projects have been shelved. There's also slow production by the design team because of working at home and they didn't have the technology set up. It's improving as we get used. The other challenge is contract cancellation, consulting contract cancellation. A developer may feel, what am I building for with this level of uncertainty? So a few colleagues have lost potential jobs, which leads to loss of employment for for themselves and for their staff. So those are the few I would identify in the initial stage. And when you come to the planning stage, there is poor coordination, flow of information, again, because of this uncoordinated working. Architects, engineers, surveyors are on different platforms, and it becomes hard to achieve good results, unlike before. The other challenge at this stage is statutory compliances. A very slow system. Those who have gone digital, like Nairobi City County or Kiambu, others who have not gone digital, but they are working from home. Sometimes somebody is absent for a week. So even if you have planned your project, approvals become a nightmare. And then we have also seen high bids by the contractors for the few projects which are coming through because of the uncertainty. We are trying to price for risk. We don't know what is coming up next. So that's another challenge in that stage of a project. Then now where the big challenges are those projects which were already ongoing at the execution stage. The first challenge has been compliance with the health authorities, the protocols of Ministry of Health. This now led to increased costs. So one of the challenges, few working hours due to curfew, and generally uncertainty of work. The second challenge is some contracts have been terminated. Some people said with this uncertainty we can't go on. Others were suspended. For example, if you benchmark with, say, somewhere like Uganda, where there was full lockdown, you had to suspend the contract. And the ones we have here have been extended because of the low productivity. There has been also a challenge of change of specs. Maybe Chirag will talk more about this. If you cannot get what was specified because it's an import item, you may have to settle for local tiles instead of imported tiles. There has been also a lot of requests by contractors for advance payments, just to try and caution the change of material prices, because suppliers have also changed their trade terms. They say it's cash on delivery instead of the usual 60 days. And of course, we are currently evaluating contractors' claims for COVID-related expenses, like complying with the Ministry of Health requirements, and also extended preliminaries because you've got to stay on the sites for longer. Then you come to monitoring of projects, the fourth stage. We are having challenges of site meetings have been suspended, or they don't happen as often as they used to. There is also poor quality check by the authorities, NCA, the county government. People have been sent on leave or they are working from home. So quality control at that stage. And also, of course, architect, engineer, site inspection. And the consequence is shady work by contractors, some taking advantage of this lack of proper supervision. Lastly is the stage of closure. You'll be surprised some developers are not keen to take over their completed projects. They are negotiating for longer defects, liability period, because you are not disposing the projects, but they have been completed. And of course, also acquisition of completion certificates is also another challenge. So those are the ones which I can quickly remember. I'm sure there are many more, and the participants, I'm sure they will make further comments on that. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, David. That's quite a lot, all the way from the initial stages of development through to planning and finally into execution. Quite a chunk of issues. Nirish, as I bring you into this, So
Yeah.
effective procurement strategies and well-managed supply chains have enabled developers such as yourselves to focus on developing and delivering products and services that exceed customer expectations. So I'm keen to understand perhaps how has the pandemic affected your focus on developing these products and services?
Um, First, thank you, GBB. Thank you, Kevin. Um, okay, how the pandemic has affected our projects and all. Uh, First, when the initial um, government shut down around mid-March, I believe most of the sites started reducing workers. We had to close down, shut down our sites for almost 2 months. After that, the government authorities and the health and safety people said social distancing and all. So what happens is where you have 20 workers working, you now have only 5 workers working. So the speed of construction has drastically reduced. Your time frame for completion shoots out of the uh, chart. And fortunately, most of the developers would be finance from banks, construction finance. So the cost of finance is really shoots up. And I believe that's being faced by most of the developers currently. At the moment, honestly, we are not even sure of the completion dates. Okay, luckily for us, one of our projects was nearing completion, so we'll just be maybe a month or 45 days delay. But the others, serious issues. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. So that the speed of development has reduced. So obviously there's a lot of delays on a lot of your jobs, as well as the cost of financing has increased, and that obviously has posed a larger challenge for you. Um,
Yes.
and I know Chirag also has a similar hat, but I'll try and probably bring you on to if I could ask you to put on your tile and carpet hat and not the developer hat. So a large chunk of supply chain is hinged on specialist suppliers like yourselves, who at time offer design advisory and mostly support consultants and developers. So what are some of the challenges that have arisen in logistics from acquisition all the way to distribution of goods for you, Chirag?
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you to GBB and Turner Townsend for getting us all together. Kevin, to answer your question, what are the challenges that have arisen in logistics? To be fair, there have been delays in logistics. So what happened when the pandemic initially started in February and March? There were delays. I don't think there were disruptions or total shutdowns from manufacturers. We import most of our products. But I think that has just delayed everything by a couple of months. The bigger challenge, I think, is, as David and Naresh said earlier, is that projects are being shelved and completion times are being extended. So what tends to happen is that there's a delay in terms of delivery to site also. So in reality, I think that the main specialist suppliers like ourselves are facing that to be the largest hurdle. The second most important point David did mention earlier is that the change in specs. What is happening is developers who are uncertain about the future of what's going to happen in this or after this pandemic are now either trying to finish off projects in the most cost-effective way is the right word to use, because of course they also have interest costs and other costs which have arisen and increase the total cost of this project. So specs do tend to change, and to make it viable for them to sell. So when that particular happens, there's a whole shift in the dynamics of the product required in the market. So that has caused a bit of a, how do I call it, a chaos of sorts. All in all, I think that the logistics part of it, to be very fair, have been fantastic. If you take our port authorities or our transporters or our railways, they have been actually very, very efficient. We've not faced much of a challenge there. The only challenge we did face initially was delays from suppliers, whether it's Europe or China or the Far East or the South America, wherever it is. Once the vessel is sailed, come into Kenya, generally we touch wood, we've been very, very, very lucky as a country, and been very, very efficient.
Thank you very much, Chirag, for those comments on. So I know there are complications initially on logistics, and now there's even more complications. So there's projects have been put on hold. I know a lot have gone into temporary stoppage of works to comply with a lot of the requirements of Ministry of Health. And I agree with you on specifications have got to change and have changed in some projects, as I think more likely as a result of this, and thanks to a bit of value engineering here and there in a bid to get these projects over the line.
Yeah.
If I could jump back to David Guido. Just now, as we go now and try to see how to mitigate some of these challenges that we've mentioned. So in the current marketplace, there are certain the certainty of outcome and around capital investment and operating cost is paramount. So how do we increase accuracy at the early stages of estimating through to the life cycle estimation of these projects?
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for that question. It's going to be more important as we move during COVID and post-COVID. The previous emphasis has been on preliminary estimates and then detailed estimates with a very little regard for life cycle costing. And actually, most conservators have not done life cycle costing, and or rather have not practiced much. It has been there in the books, but not in the actual practice. What I mean by this is after we complete the maintenance cost, the running cost, we have been emphasizing on making the project viable without looking more at value for money post-construction. We will find a lift working for 2 years. We'll find some nice looking tiles breaking away in 2 years. So this will be a bigger emphasis as we move along. How do you make the investment more sustainable? So in terms of accuracy, I blame partly the developers, and we have 2 of them here with us, because the time we give to our consultants to put together the design team, to put together the development. You are hired, you have 3 months to deliver this to the county government for approvals. So I think as we get along, we need to copy the West, copy Europe, so that we focus on completing our designs before we don't do design during construction. That has been one of our doing, and a big cause for inaccurate estimates. And again, I also want to emphasize on full scope. What do you want to build? It's not that I see Mr. Chirag is building the copy. So you are clear on what you want to build and avoid major variations as projects go on. You have to look at the shelf life of some of the beautiful looking materials in the market. but they don't mean much once they are installed. So I consider those things to be the key component of design, very well scoped, having a closer look at the materials we are specifying, and most important for our consultants, telling our developers full truth. Don't just do estimates to make get for development. That is what I would call a misrepresentation. I think in project management, they call it strategic representation to make project pass, but then very once goes down. Those will be the key considerations moving forward, and especially focusing on value for money for the developer. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, David. I know I love your point on accuracy and some of the pressures that come with developers. I mean, the timelines sometimes are very unrealistic. And let me just rope in Nirish here, because sometimes as consultants, there's a lot of push from developers to to go to ground without specifications or without a fully fledged and robust specification. So I'm keen to understand, Nirish, from you, that what conversations need to happen with developers to sensitize them on the importance of having detailed understanding of your specifications and the supply and demand balance.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I think it's only new or immature developers who'd go to who'd start the site without getting the full specs. Yeah. Because most of the good developers would have got their complete set of drawings, complete set of approvals. They would have got their specs and everything up. Otherwise, how do you know the cost of your final product if you don't have your specs and all sorted out? You can't know the your cost of your final product. Secondly, when selling off plan, because that is the key. Selling your units off plan, you definitely need to show renders which are um, realistic, rather than just something that you pick out from the architectural books and slot it in. At least we are proud as Sequel to say that our renders and all are very realistic. The finished product matches what we are showing. So basically, all developers should actually be conscious to ensure what are the finishes they would want to put, because that is what determines what your end product is going to be. You can imagine, oh, I want to build a house or I want to build an office block, which is going to be so many stories and all. Outside, it will look like this. But what about all the internal facilities and everything, including your facades and everything? So it's very, very important to have your designs and all packed down to the uh, final screws and then start. And regarding the supply chain and all, phew, now now that's where a small challenge comes in. See, the moment your approvals and all start, you go to ground. By the time your superstructure and all is ready, is almost 9 months or 10 months. Um, your finishing products, meaning your tiles, sanitary ware, sanitary fitting, um, keeps on changing. Things keep on upgrading. So, but you still need to order them well in advance. And we try and be like the Japanese, delivery on time. We don't want to stock our finishing goods too much in advance, because then you're using up storage, you're using up your cash flow, you're using up no, you're opening yourself up to pilferage and all those funny things that happen on site. So things change, but then we provide for it, and we create the budgets that within this budget, um, and realistic budgets that our tiles should be of this around this value. Our sanitary ware should be around this value. Our fittings and all should be this value. Electricals and the works. And of course, your external finishes, facades, roofing, the works. So I think it's important that everything is planned in advance before moving to site. And also, initially locking up your supply chain. Meaning, yes, I need my goods about 9 months later, but what we are looking at, this is the current product available. So let's see what happens in about 6 months' time when they are ready for shipment. I think that's the way developers should be operating. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nirish. I like your commentary on the efforts you put in to ensure that you have a bit of uptick off the plans and the cash flow projections that you have before going to ground. That quite helps to understand your balance in terms of supply and demand.
Yes.
Chirag, so with the disruption in procurement, are entities such as Talent Carpet looking to grow their local supply chain and supporting some local manufacturing industries in a bit to mitigate some of these challenges that we've stumbled upon, or what efforts really are being employed out there by entities like yourselves to build these value chains?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So I often ponder on this idea of disruption. When you say disruption in the supply chain, my take on the disruption in supply chain is as follows. It's a delay of sorts in the supply chain. There has been disruption in the construction industry in terms of completion or change of specs, as I mentioned earlier. But mine is more of a delay. So yes, there has been delays from every angle, and we mitigate that by proper planning or planning for any eventuality. You talk about local sourcing. I often wonder, local sourcing. Unfortunately, take our industry, which is the building and interiors finishing industry. Generally, very few as a percentage of local manufacturers. Two things why. One is, I assume, is the economies of scale and the cost of production. It would be fantastic to have local manufacturers here producing locally to supply locally. But I think Kenyans also need to change their sense of loyalty, in the sense that if there is a local manufacturer, and look, I'll raise my hand, we don't manufacture locally, but these are some of the issues we have thought about when thinking of manufacturing locally, is that it's so easy to fly to China or fly to India or wherever it is and start buying things. The Kenyan mentality is a very entrepreneurial mentality, whereby if I can save a little bit of money here, there, everywhere. But if we want to build our country, yes, there will be a local manufacturer here who may be 5 or 7%, maybe more expensive. But he's employing thousands of people. Let's support those guys. We need to build that loyalty within our country. Unfortunately, currently, local manufacturers are finding it difficult because the cost of production is slightly higher here. It's cheaper to, for example, tiles. It's cheaper to import from China than buy locally many a time. But the question is, we then need to rope in, as an industry, rope in the government and the authorities to promote local manufacturing, to give incentives. And I think this period of COVID has made us all realize that at one point in time, had the world gone into lockdown, had Kenya gone into lockdown for 3 or 4 months, or something else happened, we need to become a lot more self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is foremost manufacturing, whether it's building and construction industry or other industries too. We need to start manufacturing locally to spur the economic growth of a country, and to also support the local people in this country. So yes, as much as we would like to, and we are trying to support the local sourcing. Unfortunately, like take sanitary ware, for example, toilets and basins. There's nobody in Kenya who manufactures it. So we are a bit of a limbo there. But ideally, 10, 15 years ahead, I definitely see a lot more manufacturers, a lot more local collaborations with manufacturers to supply to the local markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chirag. Well, quite some depth there from you, if I'm honest, particularly on the support required from government, perhaps to create that enabling environment that can spur growth, spur a bit of creativity and a bit of investment as well locally, that we can build up capacity. I agree with you on economies of scale and the cost of production. I'll be coming back to you shortly on some of the mid to long-term considerations that we can start looking at, because I think you almost alluded to what government needs to do. Just keen to know what on the mid and short term can be done. But I'll be coming back to you on that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Nirish, as a developer, you'd agree with me that there are a lot of vacancies in office developments, in residential developments, and we've seen this over the last few years. Now, in contrast to the office and retail sectors, where at a micro level, supply may have overshot demand. Now, in the industrial sector, and I know you're looking at some of this with the likes of Tilisi, where you have 400 acres, it seems that there's a bit of traction. There is increased demand for such types of infrastructure that could eventually support real estate. So in this emerging market, how do we mitigate the disruptions of the reduced business confidence in the property market? And how do we leverage on the increased demand in the industrial sector?
Thank you, Kevin. I think at the moment, the office and the residential markets are pretty low, and it seems will be likely to be the same for at least the next 2 years that we can see, or more, because there is a lot of oversupply and all. Plus, the other thing is, especially now with the COVID and everything, what's happening is a lot of people have now got used to working from home, part-time. Office sizes are likely to reduce because quite a few people can work from home and come to office on rota basis. So I do not foresee office space increasing, office space demand increasing. But unless there are incentives and all, more companies open up, more foreign companies come in and establish bases in Nairobi, that could be the mitigating factor. Same thing with residential developments. I think at the moment it's a buyer's market, but unfortunately there is not much demand because there is not much money in circulation. And second thing is, a lot of demand was being created by investors, people wanting to buy apartments, houses, whatever, both for residential and for commercial, for rental basis. Currently, the returns and all are pretty low, so the investors are looking at other asset classes, not at the property sector. And having said that, yes, industrial is booming. Warehousing and all, logistics and all is really increasing, because while Kenya is growing, and also our neighboring regions are growing. And because of that, logistics are becoming more sophisticated, more sophisticated warehousing and all are being demanded by larger companies. So yes, that demand is there. It's going to be there, but I think for the other sector is going to be a bit difficult. Mitigating it, you have to. I mean, the developer then has to balance out um, between what they want to develop, and also currently for residential and all, the margins are so tight that margins are tight. So uh, we can see a bit of slowdown in that sector. More slowdown in the new developments in that sector.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I like how you've spoken about warehousing and the support and the amount of investment that needs to be attracted into it. So just before we go into questions and such from the team or from the rest of the attendees, I'm keen just to draw back to Chirag and David on mid long-term considerations that we can employ as a first-tier supplier, David. I'll be coming back to you on that. But first, let's look at the short-term considerations that can help mitigate some of the risks that we're seeing and the shortages and the logistics bottlenecks. Chirag, please.
So short term, I think, as mentioned earlier by David, better planning. We tend to be last minute buyers as Kenyans. If we plan better ahead of time, I think we can mitigate those factors. The issue with COVID, uncertainty, uptake uncertainty, one is not sure. So yes, there is an element of risk. How do you plan? Your question would be, how do you plan better when you're uncertain of the uptake of your product? But come what may, if you're going to extend your completion for a longer period of time, as Naresh mentioned earlier, it's going to cost you more anyway. So if it's weighing out the cost of the two. So planning, I think the most impact will be based around planning. So if we plan ourselves better, I think we can really mitigate these issues. The other important issue is that I think in such times, developers, including ourselves, tend to panic. I have often realized that, as a developer, yes, you do have experience, you do have a lot of work happening right now, but do follow the recommendation and the advice of the consultants. The consultants are the professionals. They do understand a lot of issues, because you don't want to panic, put the wrong type of product, which can delay your project also, and on the overall cost you a lot more, as opposed to going for the rightly specified product from day one. So I think it all does boil down to planning. Let's plan ourselves better.
Right, Chirag. So planning. Well, I know. If speaking of last minute buying, as a Kenyan, I'm also guilty of that, and it translates perhaps to some of the investments we make. So I agree there as well on feasibility and relying on consultants, because that's the bread and butter. That's what they've done for a couple of years. And speaking of relying on contractors, I'll bring in David Guido finally to speak to some of the mid to long term considerations that can be employed by consultants who have for the longest time supported both developers and financials in feasibility and project execution. And perhaps, David, I know there's probably a bit of policy here, so I'd also just ask you to put on your African hat and perhaps speak for the country and the region at large.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. In the short term, most consultants have focused on strengthening their ICT infrastructure at home, in the offices, to be able to work at home. And it's been quite a cost, because you need to buy printers, laptops. So that has been a short-term investment for consultants. The other item which most consultants have had for the first time is business continuity plans. We have been doing business as usual. Time now has come to think the future, to have savings for such an unprecedented event like COVID. And maybe you can't do this when you are a small farm. Maybe you need to be a stable farm, like your 1946 old farm, so that you can have funds in farm for 1 year. So that's something else the consultants will be looking at in the coming times. A lot of them now have been discussing how to do to continue their businesses. And also, as I mentioned earlier, where design team systems are not communicating because they are far apart. Adoption of versatile softwares like BIM, Building Information Modeling, is going to be a priority. We've been trying to do it, but maybe in this part of Africa, it's only South Africa which has done it 20%. The rest of us, in Kenya, the only one project has been completed on a BIM platform. So that will be something which, even when the associations are lobbying, can ask for government support to have such a platform. And then diversification. When we talk of build Kenya, buy Kenya, as Mr. Chiraga has said, we may not just sit back and wait for QS work in the offices. We can do those cottage industries and become a multi manufacturer or a contractor. So there are those which would be future ways of life, because when you hear office, residential, mall, shopping center supply, we have enough for the coming 10 years. So what are we going to be waiting for? Just to do go downs? So you may opt to become the builder or manufacturer of something. But one other important future consideration, which is happening in Europe and America, is integrated project teams delivery model. It's more in project management, but I think we have to start moving away from our traditional procurement of projects, whereby the contractors are involved early, and we have benefited by having such a working method, because you minimize the reworks which comes when the design team is dictating what is to happen. It may be a future way of delivering projects. Then Nirish also mentioned about time to market. We have been too lackluster in our programming for projects. I believe as we move forward, there'll be no room for a 6 months extension when you say margins are depressed. So you must also deliver in good time so that you make that little margin. I think that's what would come to my mind immediately. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, David. I agree with you on the business continuity plans. Even we as a business have struggled with it because a lot of the raising matters have not been precedented. So we struggle to contextualize a solution for a case by case office or a case by case business. I'll have to hand this over back to Anaya because I'm just a bit conscious of time. To just know if there are any questions or anywhere we can support before we call it. Hi, Anaya, are you still on the line? I think she's on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, I didn't, I was trying to unmute. Please tell me, Kevin.
Right. So no, I'm just handing it back to you just to see if there are any questions from that end.
So I see no Q&A from the audience yet. So we'll just announce for one more time for the audience, anyone who would like to post any questions for our panelists, and we'll move on in like about 5-10 seconds if we don't receive anything.
All right. Super.
In the meanwhile, is there something else that you would like to point out through this discussion, Kevin, or would you like to give in sort of your perspective and your conclusion for this?
Yes, I believe that the best way to take this forward and to perhaps mitigate this is to change our policies. And probably we may not be the best team to be at the front of the policy change, but with support from the likes from some of these organizations like IQSK, a lot of this, the likes of KEPSA, where I believe probably the Talim Carpet would sit. We need to change our policy so that we begin to rethink how we procure jobs. We begin to think how we can attract a bit more of foreign investment in the country to support the infrastructure bit of it, because it's from the industry. It's because a lot of things will have to change in the industry to build capacity locally, and that will in turn also have or change the demand and supply within the real estate industry. I don't know if I'm resonating with anyone.
Yes, we concur.
Yes.
All right then.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kevin. Naresh, would you like to go ahead next to give your conclusive statement on the entire issue?
Yes. I think it's very important that when the project is being planned, it's planned in totality, not piecemeal. And the moments your approval and everything are ready, and when you move to ground, you already start setting up your supply chains and everything. Ensure that you getting your supplies in good time. Similar to the way Japanese work, that your supply should be there a couple of weeks before you actually need them. Not too late, not too early. So I think when we're talking of supply chain and all, that is what it should be. What should be done with good planning. Uh, you can save a lot of money. You can enhance your cash flows. You can save from pilferages, breakages, shortages, and all those things. So basically, I think that's about it.
Great. Great point added there. Chirag, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. I echo Naresh's sentiments. I think as an industry, we need to learn how to plan better and plan for eventualities in the course of that too. But I think planning it will mitigate all the issues we have in our supply chains. Issues like this pandemic or what's happened to us right now is something that nobody could have planned for. But if we do plan everything, of course, there's always contingencies for certain factors which we take into consideration. And I think efficiency would help not just us as the supplier of the product, but also the developers and also the consultants as a whole. And there's no last minute planning. So definitely, yes, as Kenyans, we should plan much better.
Absolutely. David, would you like to provide your conclusive statements?
Okay, thank you. In my closing remarks, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. Secondly, COVID-19 is not a passing cloud, it's here to stay, so we have to find a way of doing our businesses within the confines of COVID-19. And I urge everyone to stay safe. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. We haven't received any questions as such, so I think that's where we. Okay, we have one. It's from Annie Vaburi. She says, "What do you think should change or be included in the education system, which is constructed related courses in specific, to enable those graduating out of schools to adapt to these changes in the industry? Like from the education point of view, does any of you feel there is a need to change something within the realm of the course that is offered within the construction industry? Nirish, would you like to go first?
Yes, I think we need to improve a lot of skills. Uh, skill-based education is very important because I'll give you a few examples. Getting good tilers, getting good masons, getting good, good specialized artisans is difficult. You will find many projects where your electrical wiring and all is not properly done, your plumbing is not properly done, and unfortunately, when it comes to the finishing products, we are really lagging behind. Your tiling, your fascia, and all, we really lagging behind, and there is strong need for those skills. And having said that, there's a huge scope in this vocational or specialized training for. I mean, you don't need degrees or anything. Just somebody to give you practical examples and teach you, like painting. I remember a few years back, Basco and Crown Paints and all, they were inviting workers to train them to paint well. So something like that.
Great,
Thanks.
great. Chirag, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, sure. I think mine's more on the formal education system. I think if our system can actually um, show the students the cost of not planning well enough, or the cost of taking shortcuts at the end of a project, like a case study, where people realize that yes, sometimes poor planning and hence taking shortcuts does lead to a more expensive project. Somebody very wise once said, "Cheap is expensive." I actually am a believer of that. Not in everything cheap, but generally, if you try and go cheap, it's going to cost you more expensive over time. So yes, some sort of a project or an example where they can see what these costs would add up to.
Great, great. David, would you like to add something from a surveyor perspective?
Okay, thank you. My little addition, obviously I concur with the two panelists. And finally, I would want to add industry involvement in the syllabuses so that the students who come out reflect the expectation of the industry. I think this has been going on in the construction industry courses, but it can be done better. And again, for the students, it's not just about completing the syllabus. It's about how you are, employability as you complete.
Absolutely. Kevin, since you belong to the real estate and infrastructure industry, and you've worked with a lot of such students in the past, I'm sure, would you like to add something with respect to this?
Yes, I'd love to. Still, I dwell really hard on supply and demand. There's a lot of demand for some level of proficiency in the market, and therefore we need to have the education system supply or churn out that level of competence. And obviously, so organizations like Tiling Carpet would be very good to support at an early stage of some of this development through internship or through graduate programs or such. I'm sure we have all, in a way, previously perhaps benefited from some of these similar programs that go to integrate some of the things that you learn in school and some of the things that the market demands of you. So we just need to reinforce it, I think. But change is imminent. We need to do that.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you all. And I think that's where we stop for the day because we are already running out of time as well. Thank you all, gentlemen, for your time and for adding in such important points to the discussion and giving a direction to our audiences. As I've mentioned before, this video is also available on Facebook on our page GBB Venture and will be provided soon on our YouTube page, again named GBB Venture, for anyone who would like to follow this video there. Thank you all, gentlemen, once again for your time and your contribution to this discussion. And I hope to be in touch with all of you and hope to see all our participants in our next sessions. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.